Yo guys, what is up? Max for Diablo 4 video, and today we're going over my Vampnado build. Now, I apologize that this has taken so long to come out. I've been working on it a lot and testing a ton of different things, and what I want to show to you today is what I think is the best possible version of the Vampnado playstyle. Now, the big thing with Tornado, the few issues that you need to solve is one, spirit cost, which we've solved. We have great spirit cost and we're able to spam our nados a ton. The other thing that you need is attack speed. You can cast more tornadoes, the more attack speed that you have, so we've nailed that. And the other thing that you need with Nado is survivability. Tornado and the Tornado playstyle has no issues dealing damage. The build does a ton of damage. However, with the nerfs to Grizzly Rage, there was things that you needed to figure out about how to survive. And I think we've done a really good job of that on this build. So I want to break down everything that we're doing, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So one of the very first things to talk about with this build is how you're staying alive. Now, this is something that I've been messing around with a lot, and what I found to feel best is scaling our max life as much as possible. I'm currently sitting at 16,000 life on this build, and the reason we're working with life and attack speed is because we're going to be healing like crazy. Now, Nado Druid has some of the best healing in the entire game, and it's all percentage-based healing, meaning that the more max health we have, the more healing that we're going to get from our healing skills, because it's all percentage based. So for example, every time we kill an enemy, we're getting 10% of our max life back. We're going to be getting up to like 1,000 to 2,000 healing, depending on how much health you can actually like min-max with this build, every time you kill an enemy, which is crazy. In addition, we've also got the Circle of Life. Nature magic skills that consume spirit heal you for 3% of your maximum life. We are going to be scaling up our attack speed so that we can attack as quickly as we can with our Nado, and we're able to out-heal a ton of things. We're also going to be having a ton of damage reduction and armor, but on this build, you can face tank fire enchanted enemies at Nightmare 100. You can get hit by corpse bows at Nightmare 100, and we're making the most comfortable to play like Vampnado build, where not only do we have a ton of damage, but we also got a lot of survivability. Next up, we need to talk about the temerities. Now, these got changed in today's patch 1.1.1. Just for show, I have the old ones on, but if you're going to use this build, you're gonna need to find new temerities. Now, the reason that these are so good is because they got changed. So now one of their stats is going to have max health, which is obviously great for the build. They also are going to roll with healing received, which will mean that we're going to get more healing from all of our healing effects. And more importantly, the barrier on the new pants, and you need to get new pants for this to work, is going to give you proper barrier scaling off of our max health. Currently, just to test, I'm using these bugged ones, and these, the 76%, is only giving me 7k barrier. That 7k barrier is really great, helps me survive, but when we get the new ones, it's going to give me up to 12,000 barrier every time that we're over healing. And just to test on this video, I was using these and I was getting barrier basically all the time. The amount of survivability that these are going to add is going to be amazing. And the Druid, particularly the Werewolf Druid, is going to benefit from this so much. Now, one of the issues with Tornado Druid, if you've played it, you know that it's not great at generating Fortify. You will generate your Fortify, but between like getting the actual state of Fortified, it goes up and down a lot. The reason for that is because you're constantly taking damage, so you're constantly losing your health and your Fortify at the same level. However, with Barrier, the Barrier is going to take the damage before the Fortify does. So now we're going to get another layer of survivability from our Barrier, but Fortify is going to be even better for us because we're going to be able to actually generate being fortified, which is going to give us a bigger damage multiplier from our amulet, which we're using the core skills deal increased damage while we have more Fortify, and overall it's going to be really great. If you do not have the new pants, the new temerities, I recommend just using basically the like classic quad damage reduction or triple damage reduction with armored disobedience pants with max health. But when we do get the new temerities, I think they're going to make this build absolutely incredible. The next thing I need to explain is why we are not using the Dire Wolf aspect, the one that gives you more spirit cost reduction on our amulet. And that all has to do with diminishing returns. So spirit cost reduction is traditionally additive. When you have it on your boots, when you have it on your totem, when you have it on your amulet, they're all additive together. However, as soon as you transform with the dire werewolf aspect, all of these things become multiplicative. So right now I've got 32% spirit cost reduction. If I go into my Grizzly Rage that I have 50%, you would think that I would have 82% spirit cost reduction. That is simply not the case. So here we go into our Grizzly Rage, and then we're going to scroll down to my spirit cost reduction, and I'm only at 66%. And now why is that? So the reason for this is because spirit cost becomes multiplicative on your remaining amount of spirit. So it's a little weird with 50, but because I've got 50 spirit cost, I've got 50 spirit remaining. And then we're going to do that times our 0.32, which is my spirit cost that I have, which is 16. 16 plus our 50 gives us our 66%. So from my stats on my gear, I'm getting 16% spirit cost reduction, which is not great, but it's pretty good, right? And if we, for example, if we had 70 on our amulet, then we would only have 30 spirit cost remaining, and then we would do 30 times 0.32 equals 9.6 plus 70, and then we're going to get to 79% spirit cost reduction. Now, what I've found is if you're putting spirit cost on your amulet, you just don't really need spirit cost on your gear, right? Your stats just aren't really doing much for you. That 32% that I would have if I had this on my amulet would only be giving me 9% more spirit cost reduction. And the thing about this Grizzly Rage thing is when we're in Grizzly Rage, this dire wolf, we don't have spirit issues. Regardless of like the role that we have, if we put it on our amulet or not, I'm just not having spirit problems. And so if I'm not putting it on my amulet, then my stats get to do more work for me. If I'm putting it on my amulet, I'm getting less from my stats, and it's not like we're having issues anyways. And then I can use more damage on our werewolf. And so this is the solution that I've had. We still have great spirit cost, but we're able to dish out more damage. If you are having spirit issues on this build, you can feel free to put it on your amulet. I just don't think it's necessary at all. Now that we've done like an overview of the build and like the things that we're tweaking, we're going to go through like a specific gear breakdown for everything you need to know for each aspect and slot, and then we'll go Spirit Boons, skill tree, and then into the Paragon board. So to start us off, I am using a Tempest Roar. You need a Tempest Roar for these builds to really start working. The reason for that is because it makes our werewolf skills into storm skills. When our werewolf skill is a storm skill, it now poisons enemies, and then every time we're poisoning the enemy, we're getting 60% multiplicative crit damage bonus against them with it. And Venom just really synergizes so well. Then on our chest piece, on your chest piece, you're looking for a ton of damage reduction. You can get max health here to get your health. We could get our health up to like 20k, but we've already got a lot invested into health, so damage reduction from everything. Damage reduction from Fortified is going to be all right. The best stat that you can find damage reduction wise for this build, in my opinion, is damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned. That is going to apply all the time. Damage reduction from close and damage reduction from distant are also really great. And then damage reduction. The Fortify isn't as great on this build as, like, for example, our Plague Shifter 3.0. Next up on our... Oh, and we're going to be using the aspect gain 14 or up to 15% damage reduction while shapeshifted into a werewolf. We're basically always in a werewolf. Now, the reason that this is so good is because this is a new damage reduction for our damage reduction formula. Damage reduction is multiplicative against each other, but additive when we are stacking up at the same time. We don't have any damage reduction while shapeshifted into a werewolf. That is a new thing for our damage reduction formula. So we're getting another just base like 15% damage reduction, which is really, really nice. Next up for our gloves, we're going to be using the Ranks of Tornado, most important thing. Next thing that is most important stat-wise is attack speed. Attack speed makes this build work so well. One, because it benefits how fast you can cast tornadoes. And two, the faster that we're casting tornadoes, the more that we're going to be healing. Because every time we cast, we heal. And it's also going to allow us to put out more tornadoes, which gives us more chances to proc our like lucky hit effects to reset our Grizzly Rage. Attack speed's really nice. Then crit chance is really good. And then either the lucky hit chance up to a percentage to heal or just flat lucky hit. I would prefer actually just flat lucky hit here. I just haven't been able to roll it, but the lucky hit chance to heal 1,200 health is pretty great and synergizes very well with this build. Next up, I've got a Temerity on. these are still the bugged version. These aren't working properly. On the proper working version, they will have even more max health roll, which will be really, really nice. Until you get those, I strongly recommend looking for pants like these. Damage reduction from poisoned, armor, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction from distant. Ideally, the damage reduction while fortified would be damage reduction from close. And then we got the disobedience aspect on these. Until you find a temerity, you do not need that for this build. I've been running most of my dungeons without it. But just like a lot more damage reduction on your pants is great, and then disobedience on top of that. Next up for our boots, we're going to be using spirit cost reduction, movement speed, and total armor while in werewolf form, with your movement speed, spirit cost, and total armor while in werewolf form being really, really important. I still have dexterity rolled on here. It's nice for my Paragon board. Ideally, I would get damage reduction while injured, but the dexterity is nice for now. And then on our weapon, Now for our weapon, we're still looking for the 4 damage buckets, the vulnerable damage, crit damage, willpower, and a conditional damage. Just note that crit damage on this build is not very important, which we'll talk about more when we get to our rings. Now, the aspect that I'm using is the Edgemasters aspect. We are always going to be attacking enemies with our resource, and so this is giving us a ton of damage. When I get the fixed temerities, and I'm going to have barrier up like a bazillion % and all the time, I do plan on messing around and using the like 25% more damage when we have a barrier. That should be pretty good. This aspect, they conceded, deal 25% increased damage while you have a barrier until I get the like better temerities. I'm probably not going to use that. Edgemasters is pretty great here. And then we get to our jewelry. For the amulet, most important thing, +3 in venom. You know what it is. Spirit cost reduction, cooldown, and armor or movement speed. I have a terrible amulet. This is a sacred amulet. I was saving my good amulets for my like bulwark builds. So yeah, I've got a horrible amulet. We're still doing really, really well things with it. And then we're going to be using the heart that pulls in enemies. Feels so good with NATOs. And our core skills deal more damage based on our amount of fortify on our amulet. Then on our rings, the God roll ring for this build, and finding these rings was actually really important because they're just such quality of life, is going to be vulnerable damage, crit chance, lucky hit chance, max life. We are not using crit damage on our rings because crit damage is a not important stat for the werewolf NATO build. I should be showing a clip on screen right now where I basically go and hit a few enemies, and after I hit these few enemies, my crit damage is skyrocketed. The reason for that is the aspect, the rampaging werebeast. Whenever we crit an enemy, we're getting 10% increased crit damage. This adds up, and it's going to stack all our hits. You do not need Earthen Might to stack this up very quickly, as the clip that should have just played showed. You get this damage multiplier really fast, and it caps. It's going to cap out at 990% crit damage. Any more crit damage than that is just not necessary. You're going to get massive diminishing returns on it, and so crit damage is not important for your rings at all. Crit chance, vulnerable, lucky hit, max life is going to do so well for you. And then we've got the aspect, our critical strikes with our core skills increase our attack speed by 22%, up to 25 would be really nice. And the brutal heart, which gives us damage suppression. And next up on our other ring, I've got crit chance, vulnerable damage, and max life. Don't have the perfect ring roll on this for the lucky hit. And then we've also got the barber heart on. Once again, your barber heart ideally is below 3 seconds for your exploit glyph. You can be totally fine with a barber heart that is higher on this build because of the fact that Tornado procs vulnerable. I recommended a sub 3 second barber on our previous builds because we didn't really have another reliable source of vulnerable on Tornado because it has a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable, and it's going to be proccing them a lot. It is totally fine to have a barber that is larger than 3 seconds. And lastly, on our totem, most important things are spirit cost reduction, cooldown, crit chance, and damage reduction from like poisoned or armor, or damage reduction from close, distant would be really nice. Damage reduction while fortified just isn't super important here. Now for our spirit boons, I've made an interesting choice here that I just want to talk about. We are not speccing into masochistic. I think this is a total waste of a point in your spirit boons. This reads lucky hit critical strikes with shape-shifting skills have a 75% chance to heal you for 3 seconds, or for 3% of your maximum life. This does not proc when a barber heart is active. I've tested it a few times. I've tested it before the patch. I've tested it after the patch. You are just not getting much healing from this spirit boon. And what that does is it opens up another spirit boon where we can go into Iron Feather. Iron Feather is going to give us 14% more maximum life. This is absolutely massive. If I take this off, for example, and we put it on crit chance, all of a sudden I've lost over 2,000 life, which once again is going to be helping scale our barrier amount when we're using those temerities. So don't recommend using masochistic. We are going to be using Iron Feather and swooping attacks for the more attack speed, Calamity to extend the duration of our ultimate, and Calm Before the Storm. When we lucky hit, we have a chance to reset Grizzly Rage. Now for our skill tree, we've got a point into Storm Strike and Enhanced Storm Strike. We're just trying to get down to the next point. Storm Strike is actually quite nice to have on our bar though, because enemies are going to be close to us often, and anytime you just swipe an enemy with this, you get 15% damage reduction. This is a new source of damage reduction for the build, so it's actually quite nice, and I like weaving in a basic attack every once in a while just to make sure that I'm keeping up my 15% damage reduction from Storm Strike. Then we've got Wild Impulses. Core skills cost more damage. Our NATO, between the slow and the vulnerable, I think vulnerable is a much better choice. Then we've got crit chance against close enemies, and we move faster while in werewolf form. With the changes to Grizzly Rage, you no longer get unstoppable for more than 6 seconds. You want to be fast, you want to be nimble on this build because you want to avoid a lot of the damage coming at you. Even if you have all this health and stuff, if you get CC'd, it can still be tough. I've found that I actually have better survivability with the max health rolls, and when I'm CC'd, enemies can't kill me quick enough. Versus the damage reduction while CC'd, I was just getting one shot with those on the topazes. So that's why I went max health. Next up, we're going Vigilance. Every time we activate a defensive skill, more damage reduction. Cyclone Armor with the damage reduction. Blood Howl. Now, this is an interesting choice here. I went for like just feeling really comfortable on this build, and getting Blood Howl Spirit feels really nice to me. Obviously, going attack speed is more damage, and you'll be able to cast more. I just found that using the innate Blood Howl to give me Spirit, if I ever needed it, just felt really nice with quality of life, and we've got a ton of attack speed elsewhere. Next up, we're coming down here. We're skipping everything in the companions. We've got Endless Tempest to increase the duration of our Hurricane. The reason that's really nice is because whenever enemies are nearby us, we're going to take less damage with our Hurricane active, so that feels really great there. Then we've got Neurotoxin and Venom for that crit damage. We don't need any more points in Toxic Claws. We're not going to be scaling our poison damage on this build. Then we've got 3 points into Circle of Life. Make sure that you are healing as much as you possibly can. And then Defiance, our tornadoes deal more damage. Then this is really, really important for these new changes. We're going to want to be generating more Fortify whenever we're struck. We have a chance to generate Fortify, but Unrestrained is actually such nice quality of life. Whenever we have our Fortify up, we're going to be getting way less duration on crowd control effects so that we can get out of them sooner. This is quite noticeable when you put these 3 points here, and obviously it synergizes with our barriers and our more Fortify. And then lastly, Grizzly Rage. And finally, we've got Perfect Storm versus Earth and Might versus Ursine Rage versus Lupine Ferocity. A lot of these are really great. The big reason that we're going Perfect Storm is for the Spirit to get Spirit back. The big change that you have to understand is Tornado used to not really struggle that much with Spirit generation because you had tornadoes taking all the time, and it synergized so well with Lust for Carnage. Lust for Carnage only procs on your very first hit of tornadoes if that first hit is a crit, right? So as soon as this procs, it procs the Barber at the same time, and then now all of your hits against enemies are no longer critically striking because they're all being absorbed into the Barber. So we get way less out of Lust for Carnage. It's still a must-have for the build, but because we're not getting as much sustain, Perfect Storm is the route that we're going. Trust me, you do not need Earth and Might. As I showed in that clip earlier, we are getting up to crit cap instantly fast, and we don't need the more Spirit gen because we already have really good Spirit gen. I just don't think this is necessary. If we weren't going Perfect Storm, I'd probably honestly go Ursine Strength for the 30% multiplicative damage increase while we're healthy, which we're always going to be on this build. If we weren't using Perfect Storm, I would skip Earth and Might probably altogether. And lastly, for our Paragon board, now you can find the full Paragon board on dpscheck.gg. Someone reached out to me, which was really cool, about actually creating an integrated Paragon board for our website. That is not up now, but maybe after you watch this video, it could be. But we will be adding an integrated Paragon board to the website really soon. So very cool stuff. But for this build, the glyphs that we're going to be rocking are, let me move my camera real quick. We are going to be rocking the Earth and Sky glyph. This is going to give us a new 10% multiplier with our nature magic skills. We've got the exploit glyph for the guaranteed vulnerable and more vulnerable damage. We've got Fang and Claw to deal more damage to close enemies. We've got the werewolf glyph, which is going to give us increased damage and damage reduction while we're in werewolf form. And the spirit glyph, increased crit damage, and mainly here for the crit damage multiplier. The crit damage isn't as important here. The crit damage multiplier that we get is in our 12x against enemies, and that helps us out a ton. Let's go over our Paragon board. This is pretty min-max to the best of my ability. I do not have like every max life node, but we're getting everything that is like very important for this build, and we're getting a lot of armor and survivability as well. Trust me, you do not need more damage on the NATO playstyle. Getting survivability is kind of the big thing. You will delete bosses with NATO. You will delete everything with NATO. So we're getting a lot of survivability, but we're also getting a lot of damage. So we're going up through Prime. We've got Tenacity. In our first board, we've got the Exploit glyph. Then we're moving up into the Inner Beast board. Inner Beast board's great. It's got a ton of survivability. We're going to grab even more max life here with Tenacity. Then I've got the Spirit glyph socketed. We've got more armor, damage with our shape-shifting skills. Then we're pathing up to take attack speed. Attack speed is going to be really important for us. Once again, lets us cast more NATOs. We're pathing to Slayer. Slayers gives us more armor and more potion healing. You could just path through Havoc if you wanted, but as I said, crit damage is not very important for this build. Then we're going up to the Lust for Carnage board. In Lust for Carnage, we're getting more attack speed, more max spirit, getting those crit strikes with werewolves. And then I've got the werewolf glyph here, more damage while in werewolf form, more werewolf skill damage, and more healing received. Healing received is actually quite nice for this build because all of the healing that we're getting is going to heal us more, obviously. Then we're going to the right here. We've got the Thunderstruck board. In the Thunderstruck board, I've got the Fang and Claw glyph. This is going to give me more storm skill damage and more damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, which is really nice. We're pathing up. We do have Deluge here for the more crit damage, but we're mainly just working our way up to Thunderstruck. This is another 30% multiplier for our NATOs, which is fantastic. And then we're pathing down here, picking up the Heightened Malice. The way that we've done this is I'm like splitting the Heightened Malice board so that we are getting the best of both worlds and skipping kind of the fluff in the middle. So we get Heightened Malice whenever 3 or more enemies are nearby. You deal 45% increased damage. The nearby on this is like literally like if they're on your screen. If they're on your screen, you're dealing 45% increased damage to them if you have poisoned enemies nearby, which is really, really nice. Obviously not active for bosses, but still really, really good. And then lastly, at the bottom of this, we've got Earth and Sky. This is going to give us more damage to poison enemies, but more so importantly, damage reduction from poison enemies. And we get to path right around here and then go down into the very bottom of the board, which gives us our Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 Spirit, we'll deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. We have this up basically 100% of the time because we are spamming NATOs so fast. So really nice, another multiplier. I was originally toying around with the idea of going 6 glyphs, and losing Heightened Malice was actually what I was going to lose, and I found that I just liked having Heightened Malice and the other glyph wasn't as important. So we're grabbing a lot of legendary nodes on this board, but we're also grabbing a lot of damage reduction and a lot of health to deal with Nightmare 100 enemies. Guys, that is going to do it for the build video. I hope you enjoyed. This build is so strong. I ranked it really high on my tier list, and I've been working on this build for quite a while. If you do not have the new temerities, if you do not get new ones to drop, just rock like damage reduction pants that I've been rocking, but I wanted to show you guys what is possible and how much healing and survivability you can put into a Wear NATO build. I hope you guys enjoyed the guide, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.